I can hear the groans already. Surely you're not serious? But yes, I am. The XJS has officially made the leap from black sheep to family favourite. And today I'm going to explain why, for the very first time, this might just be a better choice than the iconic E-Type. I'm also going to tell you which model you should go for and, spoiler alert, why the most expensive XJS isn't necessarily the one that you should buy. Sounds crazy, right? Suggesting that you should buy an XJS over the much revered E-Type. But hear me out. There's three key reasons why that idea isn't quite as mad as it sounds. The E-Type was launched in 1961. And whilst it is one of the most beautiful cars ever made, the generation that grew up idolising it is, well, thinning out. And demand for all but the very best cars is in decline. Meanwhile, the XJS, built up until 1996, is seeing a real surge in interest. To put it simply, the E-Type is tapering off, the XJS is just getting started. If you're thinking investment, this is where the smart money would be going. Driving an E-Type is an event, but it's also a bit of a workout. Yes, the engines were fantastic, but the gearboxes and the brakes were subpar even for their time. The XJS, on the other hand, is a much more relaxed drive, and that means that you're more likely to make regular use and perhaps even take it touring. If you're buying an E-Type on its looks, then you're going to want a Series 1. But those start at £80,000. In contrast, a top-tier XJS, a really nice one, can be had for under £20,000. So that's a quarter of the price for a car that you might actually prefer to drive. While you mull that over, let me explain why the best pick is one of the final models made between 94 and 96. This one is an XJS Celebration. It was launched to mark 60 years of the Jaguar marque. It came out 20 years after the original XJS V12, and honestly, it's better in practically every way. It's cheaper to buy, it's cheaper to run, it's better built than the early cars, it's more refined, it's easier to maintain, and it drives beautifully. And the engine? It's the straight 6 4-litre AJ16, a heavily reworked version of the AJ6. It was originally designed to go into the X300, but was actually put in the XJS before that in 1994. You get 240 horsepower, which is enough for a 0 to 60 in 7 seconds, 147 mile an hour top speed, and importantly, up to 100 miles an hour performance isn't really that far off the V12, but it's much more reliable and better on fuel. The 1991 facelift brought huge improvements in quality, interior design and reliability, and this Celebration model adds even more. Outside we have a unique Jaguar badge, which is enamelled and gold-plated rather than just plastic, 16-inch Aerosport wheels, hand-painted coach lines and chrome detailing on the mirrors and the headlight surrounds. The coupe came with sports suspension as standard, although of course that is Jaguar sports suspension, and as we'll see, it's not really that stiff. It also took the braking system from the X300. That means that the rear brakes were finally moved outward for ease of maintenance and reliability. And now, let's see how it drives. A couple more things that I want to point out about the interior. So the early ones had instruments that were like tumblers, which, well, they look very period, they look quite cool, but this obviously is a more modern setup. The rest of it maintains more or less the same format, but it's just much better made. It's more solid. The switchgear is in the same sort of places, so the heating controls, for example, same place, but it's a little bit more modernized. And in terms of the switches themselves, for example, this one here, which is for the temperature, it has the most lovely damped quality to it. At the same time, it feels like it might come off in your finger, which is the downside, but it's actually very nice. And it's a bit of a stretch as well. You can tell ergonomics weren't really their priority at the time. And then you have, again, these were there from the original cars, and they are absolutely beautifully made chrome ashtrays. Just shows you what the priorities were like at the time, and the ashtrays were absolutely beautiful. The sighting of some of the switches is a little bit more illogical, but again, these, I'm pretty sure, these are still Jaguar switches, and although they may not be the nicest, the fact that they are Jaguar switches, to me, it just, I don't know, it's nice. It's really nice. And the other thing that distinguishes the XJS, which isn't the most positive, is the fact that it is truly a big car, and yet it is absolutely tiny inside. It's a feat that I don't know how they achieved it. But it's one of the smallest cars I've ever been in, and yet one of the biggest outside. And even by modern standards, it's not small. Packaging obviously wasn't a priority at Jaguar. They spent all their time designing the ashtrays. But I mean, that's pretty much where my criticisms stop, because although there isn't a huge amount of space, I'm really quite comfortable here. The seat can be adjusted pretty much every which way. The steering is super light. It's very quiet. I think these cars were more refined than the early ones, not just because of the engines and so on, but they did other stuff, like they slightly changed the way the prop shafts were and so on. And as a result, they're just quieter, better seals as well. Like those early cars though, it just rides amazingly well. But if you hadn't told me this was the sports suspension, I'd never have guessed it, because it's so supple. Let's see how this 4-litre feels. So there's an S, N and 1. I'm assuming S means sport, so. Look, it's not wickedly quick, but it does pick up speed, and it seems that as the gears go up, the way it picks up speed feels even more impressive. It's not as refined as the V12. When you rev it like that, it does have, I'll take it out of sport actually, normal. Yeah, so when you rev it like that, when it's sort of 4.5 and above, it has a little bit of a harshness to it, not like a 4-cylinder or anything like that, but yeah, it's not a beautiful, creamy thing like the V12. Now, ultimately, an XJS isn't a car that you're going to be doing 0 to 60 runs in very often. And for normal driving, it's perfectly sufficient. The gearbox will keep it between 2,000 and 3,000 revs most of the time. Steering is absurdly light, but it's quite accurate. Perhaps the slightly taller 16-inch wheels with slightly lower profile tyres help there a little bit. But it really isn't unpleasant. It drives so nicely. Coming that. Okay. Something else we've just discovered is that the turning circle isn't great. So interestingly, when it's not in sports mode, it doesn't rev it up to anywhere near close to the red line. It stops at 4.5, which makes sense, because as I said, the engine feels like it roughens up a little bit at those top revs. But look, so it's refined, it's quiet, but what happens if you want to get a move on? Let's just put it in sport again. It's not really its natural environment, but especially these tight corners. Do you know what? It's not bad, genuinely, it's not that bad. For quite a big, heavy, long lump like this, with such plush suspension, you'd expect it to be all over the place. And there is a bit of initial lean, but it's weird. The harder you drive it and the more feel you get from the front as well, which is surprising and welcome. And also that front end is quite sharp. I'm sure it's way better than the earlier cars. I'm not sure what changes they made to the suspension, whether it was just a case of springing and damping. I have a feeling they might have done a bit more than that. There's something else that Jaguar definitely knew how to do in this era, and that is to get control weights right. So from the steering to the weight of the accelerator, the brake, and even the gear selector, they're all just perfectly matched. The original V12s, the pre-HE high-efficiency engine V12s, they're probably the most expensive to buy now as a classic. And yet this is a better car in practically every way. I mean, if you have to have the pure look of the originals with that sort of quirky interior with the interesting instruments and, you know, some of the older looking aspects of it, then I guess you'd have to go for one of those. But in practically every way, this is better. Yes, the V12 is smoother, but really you wouldn't notice unless you were pushing this quite hard. There is one thing which I prefer on the original cars, and that's the rear lights. And it's odd because I used to prefer the way the facelift looked. But over the years, it hasn't aged so well, the back end of the car. Everything else looks beautiful. And this Celebration model, in this colour, it's just perfect. It's such a beautiful car. The XJS really has come into its own. It looks so elegant. The wheels are spot on. And these facelift cars with the full colour bumpers, with these wheels, they just work so well. If you wanted to buy one now, I would recommend that you buy one of these later cars. The Celebration model has a few extra features, nice to have, but basically the very latest 94 and 95 models with this engine, they're just the most developed. By this stage, Ford had got involved and they started to sort of change things and improve build quality. And you can really feel it. It just feels like a well-sorted car. On the market at the moment, there are two Celebrations. There is one burgundy car with under 50,000 miles, and that's on for £19,000. And then there is a higher mileage car, I think 118,000, and that's on for 12,000. Now, both of those are great value. Now, if you're looking at buying one of these, the main thing to check is rust. Now, these cars, the later cars, I think it was post facelift, came with at least some galvanized panels. I think it was the wings, the floors, some other bits. So they do tend to last better. But you know, if you're going to be spending on them, the worst thing of all are problems with the body. And I'm being very lucky today because this is a lovely example of a Celebration. So best colour, as I said, I think, but also just 56,000 miles. It's in really good condition inside and out. It's a beautiful thing. The E-Type is, of course, still a legend. This isn't about replacing the E-Type as an icon, but it is about acknowledging that the XJS's time has come. If you enjoyed this and you want to get a broader insight on the story of the XJS, then have a look at this video that I did a couple of years ago. So huge thanks to Matthew, who brought it down today all the way from Yorkshire. Thank you all so much for watching, and I really look forward to seeing you for the next one.